Hi golfers, Nick here for Nick Taylor Golf. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on golf tips, we're going to take a look at what happens when we take a complete beginner through the stack and tilt system. We're going to take a look at someone who's behind me here. She's been working with me for 2 months from a complete beginner, so let's check out how she's getting on. So this is lesson 1. You can see on the left hand side we talked a little bit about the setup. And this was Summer's first swing, so you could see she had some sort of ability to play golf, but we had to take her through the stack and tilt system to really improve her golf. So the first thing we talked about was the setup position. So you can see how the feet now are more turned out and the knees are more turned out. So this is a really key thing. If you turn your feet and knees out, it's going to really open up your joints to help turn in the golf swing and take stress off your body. We also talked about the grid position and where the ball should be. So before she had that ball way too far back in the stance, and now you can see it's a much more neutral position. There's a little bit more of a straighter line now from her arm down to the club head, and you can see the handles a little bit more forward. So at setup there you can see a few changes with the feet, the hand position and the ball position. Now we talked in this lesson really about where to finish the swing, and the finish of the swing is quite important. You can see here we're still bending the arm in the backswing, which we'll get to in a future lesson, but as you came through here we focus really what happens on the finish position. This is sometimes a good place to start, right? Once we've looked at the setup, the next thing we did was actually focus on where we have to get to at the finish of the golf swing. So you can see the difference in the rotations here. So when we take a look at some of the data points here, you can see the rotation and the backward bend improved. So on the left hand side, not enough rotation of the body, not enough extension of the spine. So now I'm going to explain now what we did in that lesson to help her get from where she was on the left hand side to where she is now on the right hand side. Knowing where to start is so important. This is what I love about the stack and tilt golf swing, that there's a system to improvement. We're not just sort of guessing here. So in this first lesson, we focus first of all on the setup position. So we talked there about first of all the feet, and the feet are very important. If you set up to the golf ball with your feet square to the target line, which at first makes sense, put your feet square, it's easier to line up, but in the golf swing we actually need those feet turned outwards and the knees turned outwards. That actually opens out your hips to rotate. If I have my feet square to the target and my knees square, it's going to be harder for me to turn doing that, and it actually puts more stress on the joints. So by opening these out, it makes it much easier to rotate in the golf swing, and that's really key. We also have the grid, which we use, I use in every lesson. It's a system for swinging the club. It's the way the club's designed to swing. And when we set up, we use the grid as kind of a alignment aid, but also a ball position, and just really just a guide for the club path and the hand path in the swing. So you can see in Summer's swing, we first of all turned out the feet and the knees, but then we got her standing on the grid, got her kind of seeing this straight away, and I think that's quite important. Once you see this straight away, right from the beginning, then you get familiar with it, and it helps as you progress. So having the ball behind the left shoulder, 3 balls behind the left shoulder is where we had it, and then to have the hands just slightly forward, so they're on the inside of the left leg. So we set up now much better. Instead of having the ball back, the handle back, feet square, we're now ready to hit the golf ball. Now in this lesson here, you saw how even though there were some issues in the backswing, I actually focused more on the finish position. I use this as a starting point. So sometimes when we're coaching, we would start with the ending, which at first you think that doesn't make sense, but when you put it all together, it's really important. I think if you can finish the swing in a certain place, everything up until that point can kind of take care of itself. So in the swing, Summer was swinging through and she was not really turning her body, not extending, not moving her weight forward. So first of all, by turning the left foot out, that did enable her to turn a lot easier as she moved through into the finish. So in this first lesson, we worked on some swings where I tried to get her to push her hips forward and turn and keep her arms straight for as long as possible. So by the time we got to the end of this first lesson, Summer was starting to move a lot better into the finish. And I knew that if we could concentrate on that finish position first, it's really going to help us later on down the line. So now we moved on to lesson 2. So that first lesson we talked about the setup, and then we actually worked on a finish position. In lesson 2, now we're starting to build the backswing a bit more, and I thought the way you sort of approach in a stack and tilt system is really sort of highlight probably the key areas first that you need to improve, and certainly her finish position was something that we really had to work on to help her move her body weight through. Sometimes we start with the backswing, but we didn't move into the backswing until lesson 2. So in the lesson 2 here, we talked a little bit about what happens with the arm. So we can see how much the arm was bending, and this is quite a key part of the golf swing. When you swing, you want to try and keep that left arm as straight as possible in the backswing. As soon as you start bending that, it's breaking that relationship down of the left arm and the club, and it makes it really hard to then control the low point of the swing. So in this lesson, we talked about how to keep her arm straighter going back. As you can see here, big difference at impacts, and this is really important. This is why the stack and tilt system is so great, is that you kind of go through a step-by-step process here. Now you can see the difference with the arms. Now if we talked about keeping her arm straight on the left-hand side in lesson 1, then she'd be hitting behind the ball because her weight's too far back. Now, because she was starting to move her weight better through the golf swing, you can see now by keeping her arm straight, she was able to make better contact. So big difference there, and we just continued with the work, trying to make sure we moved through better into the golf swing. So in lesson 2 there, we started to work on her backswing and impact, just trying to keep our arms a bit straighter. Now in lesson 2, we started to work on the arms. We noticed right from day 1 that this left arm was bending. I knew that was something we're going to have to tackle pretty quickly. So now's the time. We've worked on the finish position. We're standing much better as well. Now we can start to work on this left arm. Now it's very important that in the golf swing we keep this left arm straight in the backswing, down through impact, and then by the time we finish it will fold. But throughout the course of the backswing and impact, that arm needs to stay straight. And that's because with this left arm and the club, this forms a radius for the golf swing or the golf circle, and the more this breaks down, the harder it is to control the low point of the swing. So the more you start bending, it just makes it really hard to be consistent and hit the middle of the face. The best players in the world, not only do they hit the ground after the ball, but they hit the middle of the face every time, and that's really important part of learning to play good golf, is not only controlling low point but hitting the middle of the face. So this left arm now is the key for someone to sort of work on to improve. So in this lesson, we still focused on getting the setup and the finish position right, but now we started to focus on the left arm. So this was important. I think when I see a lot of golfers that bend their arm, and a lot of it is down to poor body movement in the backswing. Now, the way someone moved in the backswing was actually okay. We did get into that further on down the line, but I knew today, really, as a beginner golfer, like, we have to go step by step, but also we have to keep it reasonably simple, right? So in this lesson, I just said to her, swing to left arm parallel, keep this arm straight, and then just try and finish the swing like we did in lesson 1. So it didn't feel like she was getting much power, but it wasn't about that. It was really about just trying to build a better structure to the swing. And we saw on the video how by keeping the arm straight through the course of the swing, it helped her structure to the golf swing. So in a lot of the moves that I do with golfers, especially at the beginning and also experienced golfers, is breaking the swing down a little bit. And I think that sometimes when you're trying to change something in your swing, if you just go at it full out, it's going to be really hard to make those changes. Now, there are some training aids you can use to keep your arm straight, but I think first of all, just trying to keep that left arm straight in the backswing, and then both arms straight as you go through is a good way to start with. And even if you just start off with kind of like a half swing, just trying to brush the ground, I'd always start with my beginner golfers really doing a lot of practice swings. In the lessons that we do, in probably an hour's lesson, they might only hit a dozen shots. We're not hitting lots of shots, we're doing lots of reps, lots of practice swings, really looking at the video on the practice swing, because if you can't do it in a practice swing, you're going to struggle as soon as you put a golf ball there. So in this lesson, just focusing on keeping the arm straight, maintaining this radius of the left arm and the club was a really key part of the golf swing for someone to learn. So as we move on to lesson 2 here, we talked about the hand position. You can see we changed the setup a little bit by not having so much bend with the knees and a little bit more upright on the right hand side, let her arms hang down, just give her a little bit more space. Then we led into what we're doing with the hands in the golf swing. So you can see on the ground there we have the noodle aligned, really just to give us some guideline for the swing plane and the swing path. So in the original swing, you can see how at this stage by the time we got to position 2 here, you can see how the hands had moved slightly more outwards. The club had moved outwards, the face was quite closed as well. So you can see now we're trying to match up the face angle to the white line there, instead of being quite shut. Also, we're starting to turn the body more as well, move the shoulder down, starting to change the knee flex. This is a really important part to help you move your hands inwards in the golf swing. So we started to work on the swing plane and moving the hands more around the body, and you can see she was kind of swinging it more around the body here, keeping the club more on plane, as opposed to a little bit more upright and hitting down on the ball. And you can see the difference in the finish position. That was from lesson 1. Now we're moving into lesson 3, trying to change the way we stand to the golf ball, trying to change the hand path, how we use the body to do that, and just keeping a check there on the club face as well. This next stage, we started to look at the golf swing now from the side view, which is very important. Trying to swing this golf club on plane is really key for your consistency. So now we're starting to build in the grid a little bit more detail here. So you can see I've laid my noodle here, basically parallel to the club line on the grid. Now we're starting to work on how we move the hands and the club around the body. So we saw in the video there that how Summer was starting to move the hands and the club up the shaft plane line. So from this camera angle here, this is the way that you measure the swing plane. Now, first of all, as we saw in the video, we did work a little bit on the setup. So as Summer set up, she tended to kind of sit back too much weight on her heels, her arms were stretched out. So the first thing we did was started to have less bend with the knees, bend forward, let our arms hang. Now we started to move the hands and the club more around. We did use a little bit more of body rotation to help with this. I think this is really important. When you swing the golf club, to keep it on plane, you do have to move your shoulder down and turn your hips and your shoulders. If you don't turn, it's very hard to keep the club on plane and swing around the body. So this lesson was quite key. We had the noodle laid down to help with the club path. We did plenty of repetitions before we hit balls, but really just starting to train the hands and club moving up the grid. We've worked so far on the setup from both angles now. We've worked on keeping the arm straight. Now we're trying to swing the club and the hands on plane. So keeping the hands and club moving inwards in the backswing and in the finish. We've continued keeping the arm straight and moving the weight forward as we go through. So now we're just starting to move the club around the body on an arc, and this is really key when you're videoing your golf swing, making sure you have the camera set up in the right spot first of all. I know I teach a lot of you guys online, and sometimes the camera's at a different angle. It's very important you get this square to your stance line, and having some obstacle there is quite important. If you slice the golf ball, having something there is quite key. Also on this point, by keeping your arms straight and moving your weight forward, it's much easier to swing the club more around your body on an arc. So all these pieces now are starting to link together for Summer in the golf swing. So in this next lesson, you can see a difference that's set up here we just talked about in lesson 3. So now in the backswing, we're starting to work on how you turn and tilt properly in the golf swing. This is really important. So in the original swing, we saw how the arms were bending, partly down to the way she was moving her body. So you can just see on the screen here, I've just pulled up some numbers. So the tilt number is how much her left shoulder moves down, and also the rotation is how much she turns in the golf swing. So you can see how her knee flex is changing, it's tilting her hips, it's tilting her shoulders. This is a key move to keep your arms straight. It's a key move to turn in the golf swing and create power. So the way you turn and tilt is so important. When you look at the best players, they all tilt around about 36 degrees with a 7-iron in their backswing, as Summer is doing in this swing here. So this was a really important lesson, basically learning how to tilt in the golf swing to help keep the hands on plane and create power and strike the ground in the same spot. So up until this point, we've worked on Summer's weight, making sure we move her weight forward. We've worked on trying to build a better structure to her swing by keeping her arms straight. We've now started to work on moving the hands and the club more around the body on plane and on the arc, on the grid. Now we need to sort of build some more power into the swing, build a better tilt to the shoulders. So in this lesson, we worked on the movements of the shoulders in the backswing. So you can see in this lesson, I was holding the club there against the head, and this is a really good way to get that feeling. I'm going to show you a drill later that you can use, which we kind of used in the last lesson, which we're going to take a look at in a minute. But in this lesson, really, you can see the difference in how Summer used her shoulders as she went back. Now, some key checkpoints that you need to do in the backswing. As you swing back, as you move your left shoulder down, the left knee moves down, the right leg straightens. So by the time we get to the top of the backswing, not only are we tilting the shoulders, we're also tilting the hips. Now for Summer, by moving and turning and tilting, this was helping her build a much better structure to her backswing. I see a lot of golfers that flex their arms because they don't tilt or turn enough in the backswing. So a common issue is for golfers to kind of bend forward, sway, and the arms start to bend. By moving the left shoulder down, extending the leg, tilting and turning, it makes it much easier to keep this arm straight. So this is how we progress the swing. In the lesson 2, we worked on her arm straight, but this lesson I worked on trying to move her body better and keep her arm straight at the same time. I think first of all, when you're working on your golf swing, doing some half swings or 3/4 swing feels are quite a good way to build the structure to your swing. But now we need to create more power into the swing and move better into the backswing. So this is why we waited until this point to really focus more on the shoulder tilt and the turning in the backswing. You can see how she turned a lot more here. So we did a lot of repetitions, just hitting the ground, keeping the head stable. In the base here at GOLFTEC, we have various training aids we can use to help keep your head stable. I've done lots of videos on this, but really the quickest way, it was me to hold her head there and really get that feeling, then hit the ground. So it's very important that in the backswing you tilt the left shoulder down and turn, allowing the right leg to straighten. So we're starting to combine all these things now. We're starting to move the weight better, keep the arms straight, move the hands inwards, and now move the left shoulder down, which is a very important part in the backswing to build a much better structure to your golf swing. So in this next lesson now, we're going to try and put all those pieces together. Okay, so check this out. We now have the original lesson on the left-hand side and the most recent lesson here on the right. And you can see the difference at setup. We talked about this in lesson 1, turning the feet out, trying to get the ball position a bit further up on the grid, a bit more neutral position instead of having it so far back. Now it's important when you're working on your swing, you try and keep on top of these changes. So every week we look at this, first thing I do is check the setup. So setup looks good. Now in the backswing here, you can see in the original swing, how the arm was bending in the backswing. We did get this swing a little bit longer on the right here through some of the lessons, but today we're really focusing on the tilting, which I'm going to show you as we move through here. So coming through impact, you can see the difference in the arms. By the time the right arm's parallel, big difference here. So now Summer's starting to push her hips forward and starting to bend backwards and extend in the finish. So there's a huge difference here as we moved into the finish. So I want you to see what this looks like from the side view as well. So check this one out. So now looking at the side view here, you can see the weight's a bit more evenly distributed on her feet now. She tended to sort of sit back on her heels on the original swing. Now in the movements of the swing, we've worked hard on the tilting and keeping the arms straight, and then also on the swing path. So as we come down here, you can see the swing plane is slightly more shallower on plane as opposed to coming slightly outside. Here is perfect, look at that. So you've got the club head and the hands in line at P6, it's really good for a new golfer. It's playing less than 6 weeks. Now as we come through, you can see how the arms, we saw it from the arms of staying straight. Now look at the difference in the shoulders tilt here and the way she moves, hips forward, maintains that angle to the ground. So looking at this position on the right, she could be a professional golfer, and that's an amazing change, I think, from where she started 6 weeks ago using the stack and tilt system. A huge difference there. Most recent lesson, we tried to put these pieces together, and we focused on this lesson actually on the finish position. Bear in mind, this is 6 weeks after her first ever golf lesson. Like, it's an amazing transformation. I'm still amazed really, and I'm excited to see actually how she's going to progress over sort of the next year. So at GOLFTEC here, we work with our students pretty much week in, week out. I know Summer works a little bit more than some of my students. She actually does 2 lessons per week, 2 30-minute lessons per week. A lot of my students would do 1 30-minute lesson per week. So in 6 weeks, we've done 12 lessons. She's practicing between lessons, and that's important as well. In the base here, we have video, and I'm always stressing this point out to you guys online when you're practicing to see what you're doing in your golf swing. You need to get some feedback. It is important that you video your golf swing. You not necessarily have to hit golf balls to improve. So in this lesson here, we focused on trying to put all these pieces together, as we always do as we go through it, but actually we focused a bit more on the finish position and the way we move our hips, our shoulders, and how we keep our arms straight. So this was quite an important lesson. We were learning how to keep the head stable. You could see how I kept the club on her head there, as we did in the tilting lesson, but now we're actually learning how to tilt in the finish position. And this is just as important, right? You have to tilt in the backswing, but you also have to tilt in the follow through. And the tilt in the finish is something that I can't stress how important that is. As you swing down, if you were to tilt your shoulders the most, you would actually drop that club on the inside. So a lot of golfers out there that are struggling with slicing and coming over the top, you probably haven't quite got enough tilt in your golf swing. So the more you tilt and drop this right shoulder down, the more that drops the club under plane from the inside. But at the same time, you have to push your hips forward and also extend the body. So at this stage here, the instruction I gave to Summer was to swing to right arm parallel, bend her chest backwards, tilt her right shoulder down, push her hips forward, and keep her arms straight. So that was the instruction I had. So I kept the club there. We did lots of practice, as we always do, and just stop in there. And by this stage, Summer's head should still be against that club as it goes through. Now, the important thing is when you do this, you are still turning. So although my head stays stable, I am actually turning as I go through. So we actually practiced a slightly shorter finish here, but really just trying to combine these movements, trying to tilt the shoulders, push the hips forward, keep the arms straight as we go through and bend backwards. So this is a really great way to train the tilt in the swing. So now I'm going to show you guys a drill that you can practice at home to work on your tilt in the finish. Okay guys, one of the most simplest, easiest drills you can practice at home. All you need is a door or a wall. And just before I do this, behind me there's that picture on the wall there of Dustin Johnson, and you can see his move here and tilt through the golf ball. Best player in the world tilts, everybody tilts. So put your head against the wall, no club needed. Backswing, moving the left shoulder down and into the finish, pushing your hips forward, tilting the shoulders, bending backwards, extending the spine, keeping the arms straight. Notice how my head turns as I do this. So this is one of the best drills to get you the feeling of tilting, extending and turning in the golf swing. So there we have it guys, a huge transformation there by Summer. It's really a joy to teach her and use the stack and tilt system. I shared with you my mug last week. This time I've got coffee in here, but you got the 10 words. Okay, weight forward, that's what we did in that first lesson. Instead of working necessarily on the backswing, we worked on a finish position. If you can get your weight forward into the finish, that's really going to help you hit the ground after the golf ball. It's what the best players do. The shoulder down, which is the tilting. So not only the tilting of the shoulders in the backswing, but also into the finish. The hands in, moving the hands and the club around the body in an arc and on the grid, so important. Next two words there, arms straight. Keeping a structure to the swing, not bending the arms as you go through, really key part of the golf swing. And then tucking the hips, which is actually where we started in that first lesson, but moving the hips forward, tucking them. We shared with you the head on the wall drill, one of the best drills to get that feeling. But using the 10 words of the stack and tilt golf swing, it's amazing how if you stick to this kind of blueprint of working on your golf swing, it's really going to improve your consistency and your performance over the long term. So thanks for watching golfers. Be interested to hear your comments below if you've worked on any of these 10 words or you've worked on the stack and tilt golf swing and you've seen some dramatic improvement. It's amazing some of the changes we see with just beginner golfers in just 6 weeks. So thanks for watching golfers. Enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up and I'll see you again next week for another video.